Welcome everybody to the first ever episode of the C&C Podcast. That is Alex Hobson, I am William Espy, and we are your hosts. We have a variety of topics. Say hello, Alex.
Hello guys, I am the co-host of this podcast. I'm really excited to get things going.
Alright, so we have a multitude of topics here, all stretching all over the NHL, and eventually we will branch out into other sports, but this is what we are here to talk about today. First thing, if you have been following the news, you have heard about Travis Hamonic of the New York Islanders. He has requested a trade for family reasons to a Western Canadian team. What are your thoughts on this, Alex?
Truthfully, I was surprised when I first heard of it because I read the news on it and I was just like, wow, because it seemed like he was very comfortable in Brooklyn now. Used to be Long Island, but he, I think what I was hearing was that it was because of personal reasons and he wanted to be closer to his family. I don't think it had anything to do with the culture of the team or the locker room or any of the usual reasons for why a player would want to request a trade.
Yeah, I think what it had to do with was his dad. After his dad died a few years back, actually that was a while back, a long time ago I believe, but he just got really close to his family, and being in New York away from them in Manitoba, which is more central than west, but still goes either way. So I could see him like a Minnesota type trade destination if they were to take him.
Yes, that's very true. I was also hearing that the asking price for Travis Hamonic was an NHL-ready defenseman that could slide into their roster immediately, and that would be either one or two, because Travis Hamonic is a good defenseman. He's still young. He's only 24 or 25, I believe, and he is a big part of their defensive core. So they would want something big back if they were to part ways with Hamonic.
Yeah, the thought I've had is, what if they sent him to Winnipeg? Well, to a lot of people that wouldn't make sense at first. If you think about it, they have a good defensive core. I believe they have Bogosian now. Then they have, I always get their defense mixed up because I always get Myers and Bogosian mixed up. But
they have Myers.
They have Myers. Okay, yeah. Yeah, okay, yeah. That makes sense. They have Myers, they have Bufflin.
Okay.
But the thing is, Bufflin would be the one I see them trading. Reason why? His contract's up. I believe he has expressed that he will not be in Winnipeg next year.
Yeah. And that would make a lot of sense for the Jets because they have a lot of up and coming stars. Everyone knows that they've got a very deep prospect pool, and they're like second to Detroit for finding gems in the draft. Like they've got, first of all, Nikolai Ehlers, who's tearing it up right now. He was expected to, and then in the system they've got Kyle Connor, Nick Patan, Chase DeLeo, and of course Connor Helbig. I hope I said that right. But in general, they have a deep prospect pool, and they're going to need the cap space to re-sign all those guys once the time comes.
Not only that, but the thing is, it also gives them more security. If they trade away Bufflin for Hamonic, it would give them long-term security, but there would also need to be some other piece of that going to the Islanders in the odd chance that Bufflin doesn't re-sign.
Yeah.
So, say what you could do is add a conditional pick, maybe a third that if he doesn't resign turns into a first. That way it balances out. You think that trade could happen?
I do think it could happen, I'll be honest. First of all, Bufflin has already been generating a lot of interest around the league, and with the Islanders willing to part with a young defenseman, I think they would be very interested in Bufflin. He's a playoff performer, he's big, he can make hits, and he's an energy guy when you need it. I think this trade could work out well for both teams. That's my personal opinion.
And Bufflin, I don't think he'll ever be confused as like an elite defenseman, but he is one of the best top four defensemen in the league.
Yes, that makes sense.
He's not going to go out there and be like a Ryan Suter or a Duncan Keith, a Chris Letang. He's not going to get that for you. But he can go out there, make plays, do his job. And also, he can play forward if they need to.
Yeah, I was actually just going to talk about that. One of the big aspects to Dustin Bufflin's game that everyone always seems to forget is the fact that he can play both forward and defense. He's reliable, so if they have a forward who's injured and they don't really have any NHL-ready players to call up, you can always put Bufflin on defense. And for the Islanders, they could call up someone along the lines of Scott Mayfield, Adam Pelech, or Ryan Pulock. Like they've got a decent amount of close to being NHL-ready defenseman in the system that could be called up just in case Bufflin does need to make that transition to forward, and it could happen on the Islanders if he gets traded there.
And another thing is, if Kyle Okposo, for example, goes down, you have Bufflin who could go in there and also play a pretty similar game on the right wing. He wouldn't score as many goals, but he could do a good job up there.
Yeah.
Another trade destination I've been hearing a lot about is Edmonton. I'm not sure what they'd be able to part with. Probably a young forward, although
Yeah.
it sounds like New York would want a defenseman back rather than a forward. But
Edmonton doesn't have too many options on defense. They have Justin Schultz, but I don't know if the Islanders would be interested in him, and I don't think that'd be a good one-for-one trade, Hamonic for Schultz. I think the Islanders would be losing that personally.
Yeah, I think what they could do is maybe get an older defenseman, maybe someone who could step in their bottom pairing, like an Andrew Ference maybe.
Yeah.
Add him in there, and then add in another big player. Maybe.
Yes.
I wouldn't say. This is a tough one. Would Hamonic be worth like a Jordan Eberle?
I think Hamonic would be worth a Jordan Eberle, and the only concern around Eberle is the fact that he was playing with some pretty good line mates in the past, in Hall and Nugent Hopkins. But the thing is that those players could also have been generating points off of Eberle, and he does have a pretty big injury history. Like he missed the first part of this year with I believe it was I'm not sure what type of injury it was, but I do think that the trade would be even 1-for-1 because they're around the same age and they have basically. Hamonic has in a defenseman what Eberle has in a forward. They're both very solid players, and they both still have room to grow.
Yeah. And then another thing about Edmonton is they need to do something about their center core. They have Nugent Hopkins. They have McDavid now. They have Leon Draisaitl. They're all doing well. What do you do about that? You can't keep on with all three of them forever, especially Taylor Hall and Nail Yakupov out there.
You know what? Well, Edmonton has always been kind of like that team that's like, we'll do it next year. We want to be a contender. But it's never seemed to work out for them. But I think this year, if they're going to trade anybody, like they've said this year after they got McDavid and they signed some big names in free agency such as Andre Sekera, Mark Letestu, etc., they've made their statement that they want to be a contender this year. And if they were to bring in a defenseman, they'd have to part with a forward, and I think the forward that would make most sense for them is Leon Draisaitl. And I think that because he's obviously playing like he's NHL ready right now, and I'm not saying that he's not NHL ready, but he's the least out of NHL ready out of all their centers, and to part with Nugent Hopkins, who right now is their number one center, I don't think that would complement a potential playoff run for their team. And I think Draisaitl would also generate a lot of interest around the league. The former third overall pick in 2014, like that's a pretty big name you're tossing around.
Yeah, that would bring in a lot of interest, but the thing is, that's also another reason why Edmonton might want to hold on to him. He hasn't had time to show what he can do in the league, and that could be a disadvantage to him because it might turn out to be a very good player. Like it wasn't that long ago. Plus, he's tearing it up this year. He has 13 points in 8 games. He's a +6, 5 goals, 8 assists in his rookie year. He's doing great.
That also makes sense. The thing is that Nugent Hopkins has shown ever since he's been drafted, he's shown that he can be a solid centerman, and he is, if any, obviously McDavid is going to take over in the near future, but for now he is their number one center, and he will be a very good number two center once McDavid takes over, and it's very possible that Draisaitl could just be on a good streak, and he could fall back to earth in his second year, so they might have to take a risk on him and deal him for a need that they could obtain now, and. I'm not saying... Sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
That was an awkward pause. Okay, the thing is, we know for a fact McDavid is going to be on the team. We know Hall is going to be on the team. We know Eberle is probably going to be on the team. Those guys are pretty much untouchable. Same with, I'd say even Nail Yakupov at this point. He was really good with McDavid out there. He was tearing it up. Ever since McDavid got injured, he's been on a cold streak, but that's to be expected. But they do. I believe Darnell Nurse has been doing pretty well this year, I believe. Not amazing. Yeah. 4 points in 9 games, which on a defensive core like Edmonton, it's to be expected that they're not going to do well necessarily at this point in their career.
Yeah.
Cam Talbot, on the other hand, he's been a letdown.
Yeah. And we've seen that situation happen in Edmonton before. They brought in Ben Scrivens, who had a really, really good tenure in LA, but then unfortunately was knocked out of the picture when they called up Martin Jones, who has also since been dealt, and he started performing at like an Andrew Hammond type level. And they brought in Scrivens thinking he'd be able to take over as a starting goalie, even after posting solid backup numbers in Toronto. But he ended up having a decent streak for them in the second half of the 2013-14 season, but then falling back down to earth, and I believe he's in the minors right now. So it's not an unusual situation in Edmonton.
Yeah, if you look at Talbot's stats in the last 5 games, his save percentage in 4 of those games has been .857, and in the other game, which was the Calgary game, it was .844. He is not getting it done out there. They need better if they're going to be a good team.
That's very true. All right, what is the second topic you had going?
Okay, now, Maple Leafs. Mike Babcock said they are a playoff team, as you mentioned to me. Would you like to take over on this one?
I would, yes. Me being a Leafs fan, I know a lot about what's happening with their team, and from the start of, from last year, ever since it seemed like they had that massive 9-2 loss to Nashville, ever since they fired Randy Carlyle, ever since Peter Horachek took over and didn't change the results, the Leafs knew that with the culture and the team that they had, they wouldn't be able to go on a playoff run, so they began rebuilding, fired all their staff, brought in, management such as Mark Hunter, Kyle Dubas. They both have played huge parts, and one of the biggest headlines of the offseason was in May when they brought in Mike Babcock as head coach. He's the treasured former head coach of the Detroit Red Wings, and he's just been an all-around solid coach, coached Team Canada to 2 gold medals, and he said in the first press conference since being introduced as the Leafs head coach that there would be pain, and that's what all Leafs fans are expecting. They made their statement that they were rebuilding, and they traded, for example, their top player Phil Kessel to the Pittsburgh Penguins for Kasperi Kapanen, Scott Harrington, Nick Spaulding, a first and a third, I believe the deal was.
That trade is starting to look better every day as it passes.
Is. Yeah, and Mike Babcock has said, like I said, he said there will be pain. So nobody was expecting the Leafs to play well this year. But what they were expecting was their one-year contract veterans such as P.A. Parentos, Sean Mathias, Matt Hunwick, players along the lines of that. They were expecting them to step up and have decent campaigns just to be dealt at the deadline to contenders for picks or prospects. This is all part of a plan that may take a while. But the thing is, the Leafs are playing much, much better than their record shows right now. For example, one of the biggest storylines of the season so far has been James Reimer. Everyone thought that Jonathan Bernier would be the guy to take over, and that Jonathan Bernier was their number one goalie. He's played better since arriving in Toronto than James Reimer has during that. Well, that was actually before this recent stretch of games. Reimer has completely stepped up, and he has shown that with the right play in front of him, he can be a good goaltender. Brought the Leafs to the playoffs in 2013, and that on top of other things such as sorry, my mic went up in volume, I'm not sure why, but that on top of other things such as Morgan Riley evolving into an elite defenseman. He's tied in the team lead with points right now with Tyler Bozak. Speaking of which, he's actually performing very well even without Phil Kessel, who was very good friends with him, and they played online while Phil was in Toronto. And I don't want to say that the Leafs are going to make the playoffs this year. I'd actually prefer, I don't you can call me not a true fan or whatever, I'm still going to support them. But if they didn't make the playoffs this year, I wouldn't mind, because I think another top-end draft pick, such as Jacob Chychrun or Austin Matthews, Jesse Puljujarvi, players like that would greatly help them in the future, rather than barely just missing the playoffs and finishing, say, 16th in the league. But I think if they keep up this pace and they show that they're not ready to choke come January, February, I could see Lamoriello being tricky and trading, not prospects, I would say, but trading up and getting a couple of players to help them on a small playoff run. But again, I'm not getting my hopes up. I don't know if this team is ready for a playoff run yet, but I can see where Mike Babcock's coming from.
I wouldn't say it is yet, but the thing is, if James Reimer keeps playing like this, they have to make a decision. Do you trade him and continue with the rebuild, or do you let him keep playing and push the team towards a playoff spot?
Personally, I think the better option would be, if you look at the rebuild on paper, I think the better option would be to trade Reimer, because if he keeps playing this way, then he could generate a lot of value at the deadline. Lots of teams would want a solid backup goalie to help them on their playoff run, and such as last year when the Islanders brought in Michael Neuwirth from Buffalo. right when they realized that they were going to be a playoff team that year. They surprised a lot of people. But I think if Reimer is doing really well, but the Leafs aren't proving that they're going to be a playoff team, like the rest of the team isn't showing up, then I think it would be the better option to trade him. But if they can actually remain in the playoff and get into a playoff spot, first of all, and remain in that spot for as long as they can, then I don't see any reason why they shouldn't just keep going and get a couple of cheap assets to help them go farther in the playoffs. That's just my opinion, though.
One player who, looking at statistics, who seems to surprise me as a massive letdown since he's been acquired by the Maple Leafs is Michael Grabner. In 17 games, he only has 2 assists. He is a +2, but what's wrong with that?
I don't really know what's going on with Michael Grabner. You know what? I'm not going to say he's having a good season because he really isn't. Like, there's not much you can say. 2 assists or whatever it was in 17 games. That's just that's not something you want on this team. And it sounded like he was going to get maybe some interest at the deadline if he performed well, but that clearly didn't show to happen. So what it sounds like right now is Grabner is just in a very bad offensive slump. He has been a healthy scratch a couple times, but I will say that he has been a decent player everywhere else. Like, he's been good defensively for them. Babcock's giving him penalty kill time. And he is being given only 4th line minutes, so it's hard to get much done offensively down there. But then again, Babcock is playing most of his lines equally. I think it's just a matter of the transition from Jack Capuano's system to Mike Babcock's system and just fitting in. Like I said, the score sheet, he hasn't been showing up, but everywhere else he's been pretty good rather.
I think if the Maple Leafs are going to make a run towards the playoffs, they need that number 1 player to step up. And in my opinion, that number 1 player needs to be James Van Riemsdyk.
Yeah.
He's been doing good getting goals, but he needs to get more assists. He needs to be helping set up other players. Otherwise, that line, it's going to be a one-dimensional line. Everybody's going to be guarding Van Riemsdyk. They're not going to try to go for anybody else.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. JVR, he's been scoring a lot, and he's been getting a lot of power play goals. His prime role, he switched his prime role a little bit, I have to say. Basically, what's been happening is, what it used to be when Kessel was in Toronto was Kessel would camp out in the top of the circle and take all the shots. Bozak would be setting him up, and JVR would be in front of the net getting tip-ins and deflections. Now what's happened is he's been either on the point or in the slot taking shots while Leo Komarov has been in front of the net. And that brings me into another point. Leo Komarov is also stepping up very nicely this year. He generated the name of a fan favorite in the shortened 2012-2013 season as somebody who hit. He threw a lot of hits, and he was originally from the 2006 draft, I think. But the Finnish player has just been absolutely destroying on the Leafs. He's been, like I said, he's not known as much of a scorer. He's an energy player that'll play well defensively and throw a lot of hits. I think he was 5th in hits in 2013, but this year he's been exceeding expectations. I know he's 5th on the team in points right now. I believe it's 9 points in 19 games, something along the lines of that. And he's been proving that he can score and that he can score as well as play defense and physical. And he's been given first line minutes to replace Phil Kessel by Mike Babcock. It seems like that's what he likes to do, is put 2 scorers with an energy player. And Komarov has been fitting in greatly as an energy player alongside of Nazem Kadri and James Van Riemsdyk.
I believe that Komarov is a very underrated player. He's a 200-foot player. To me, this may be out there, but to me, he reminds me of a very poor man's version of Jonathan Toews. He's not nowhere close to skill-wise, but he has a very similar play style to me.
He does. He's not much of a face-off taker. He doesn't play center, but the way that Toews can put up 60 points a season, Komarov is only really good for 40, and maybe he hasn't even hit 40 yet. But if he continues to play at this pace and doesn't get injured like he did last year, then I think he could hit 40 points. And if he plays at this pace, then he'd be lucky to maybe hit 50. But I think his defensive game is there, and his penalty kill game is there, and I think that he can step up in all areas of the game for the Maple Leafs. And I think he can prove to be a very valuable player in the very near future, and potentially in the long run for them. He's only 28, I believe, so he still has at least another 5 years in him.
Yeah. Eventually it comes to a point is, what are the Maple Leafs going to do with this deadline? Are they going to be buyers or are they going to be sellers? They have to make a decision.
I think that decision is going to come later on in the year when, like, say around January, when they evaluate how they've been playing for the rest of the year. If this like little run right now comes to an end, and they're back to their old ways, whether it's James Reimer or Jonathan Bernier net and whoever's scoring, if they're back to their old ways and not winning very much by January, then I think they'll be sellers at the deadline. But if they can keep this up and go on like a 2-to-1 ratio, win 2, lose 1 at least, and they can get themselves into a playoff spot and maintain that spot, then I don't think their GM Lou Lamoriello will be afraid to trade people and help the Leafs improve their roster for a potential playoff run. Mind you, they won't be going far if they do go on a playoff run because they lack a number one goalie. Reimer's playing like one right now, but he's not a proven number one goalie. They don't really have a top defenseman. Morgan Rielly is evolving into their top defenseman, but he's not quite there yet. And they have a top forward in James Van Riemsdyk, but he's not good enough to quarterback an entire team deep in the playoffs.
That goes back to the last topic we had with when we were talking about Dustin Byfuglien. If a deal between Winnipeg and the Islanders don't get worked out, could something like that somehow work out for the Leafs?
A Dustin Byfuglien deal, what you're saying?
Yes.
That would be an all right. That'd be a good trade for the Leafs if it happened. I remember there was speculation about it back in 2013-14. It was something along the lines of James Reimer, Nazem Kadri, Jake Gardiner, and somebody else. I think it was either a prospect or a late round pick for Dustin Byfuglien and Evander Kane, but Dave Nonis didn't end up making the move. But Byfuglien, I think, would be a very valuable player to have in the playoffs. I just don't know what the Leafs would give up to do it, because at this point, if they go on a playoff run, they'll be extremely lucky, and I don't think they can afford to part with any of their top prospects. Yeah, obviously, I know if they're trading for Byfuglien, players such as Mitch Marner and William Nylander definitely won't be in conversation. Even players like, Kasperi Kapanen and Connor Brown, Andreas Johnson, players along the lines of that. But even players like Nikita Korostolev, Josh Levo, Brendan Leipsic, they could all prove to be decent NHL players in the future, and I don't know if the Leafs management would be willing to part with that. And that same goes for their first-round pick. If they fall back down to earth and don't have a first-round pick, then that's going to create a huge problem for the Leafs, and they'll look like the same way they did 3 or 4 years ago.
To me, it seems like the Leafs are making a similar team to the one they had in the 90s, when they had Matt Sundin and all those guys.
Yeah.
It's in the future, you're going to have your number one center. You're going to have Mitch Marner. You're going to have the agitator. You're going to have Leipsic. You're going to have... They're hoping they're going to be able to keep a number one goalie with Reimer, but he has to prove that he can keep doing it.
Yeah, and they do have 2 goalies that could end up proving themselves in the minors in Antoine Bibeau and Garrett Sparks, who are both producing solid numbers, sharing time with the Marlies. But, again, those 2 are gambles, and it's not for sure whether one of them will step up and actually end up being a number one goalie for them.
For example, look at Jacob Markstrom over in Vancouver. He's a great goalie in the AHL, and I believe he's done well in the NHL this year. But prior to this year, whenever he got called up, he was just abysmal. There was nothing good coming out of him.
Yeah.
He just couldn't make a save to save his life, it seemed like.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Maple Leafs have to hope they don't get one of those type of goalies with those 2.
That's very true. Now, what is the next topic you had on that list, sir?
We go from one new coach to another, although this one happened in the middle of the season, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Starting out 0-8-0 since, actually 0-7-0 with former head coach Todd Richards, who I am a personal fan of. Good luck to him wherever he goes. But John Tortorella, since he has been signed, they have gone, what is it? I believe it is 7-5, I believe. Don't quote me on that. I could be wrong on that. I believe that's the record. And they are just playing a lot better. They're playing better defense. They're playing better offense, better power play, better penalty kills. They're just playing better.
Yep. Much like the last topic, your knowledge of the Jackets is much higher than mine. So I'm going to let you take over this one, and I'll chime in whenever I have something to say. Go ahead.
Yeah, I believe they have killed 16 penalties in a row ever since the Tortorella system got into place. They're blocking shots, which is something they weren't doing, and they actually held the St. Louis Blues to under 20 shots last night. They are just playing phenomenal. It hasn't been translating to wins for the most part, but now they're starting to get on a roll. They're getting... William Karlsson finally scored his first 2 goals of the season a few days ago, and I'm proud of him for that. Karlsson has been playing great. He's been playing a great 200-foot game. He's just been amazing, but he hasn't been able to translate it onto the scoreboard.
Yeah,
Now,
my personal opinion as an outsider that's paying attention to the Jackets but doesn't really follow them close like you do, I think the Jackets are going to climb out of the slump and make the playoffs. Like they did it a couple of years ago when they didn't have like as much talent as they do this year. Like they didn't have a Brandon Saad and players like Ryan Murray and just like Ryan Johansson was, but players like him along those lines weren't really as stepping up like they are this year. But I think the Jackets, now that they have Brandon Saad and now that Johansson is starting to perform again, I think if the right players start stepping up, then I think they could make a playoff run like everyone hoped they would this year.
so the player's been surprising me is I'm a huge fan of him, but Boone Jenner has just been phenomenal this year. He has 9 goals already, tied for the team lead with Saad. He is just playing phenomenal. Even through the rough times, he was doing really well. And it's one player I feel really bad for if this is Nick Foligno. He hasn't been able to get on the board.
I was actually going to ask you about that. What are your thoughts on Nick Foligno, and what do you think is his problem right now?
He's just getting really bad luck. Like, he'll get a wide open net, and the goalie will dive back and save it. Or he'll hit the crossbar. It'll, get blocked by the player in front. Something just happens, and it can't get going in the back of the net. But I do feel like Scott Hartnell said this the other day. Actually, it was a while back. But once Foligno gets that first goal in this run, he's going to go off. He's going to start scoring a lot.
And one player that I can compare Nick Foligno to on the Leafs is Nazem Kadri. Babcock has been trusting in this guy more than anything. He's been putting him on the ice for all the pressure situations. He's their number one center right now, and Babcock himself has said that even though Kadri's not scoring right now, his play has been excellent all around. And personally, I think that once Kadri starts getting bounces going his way, and once he starts scoring a little bit more, like you said with Foligno, he will start scoring a lot, and that will prove to help the Leafs very much. But back to Nick Foligno, I don't want to sidetrack.
Yeah, Foligno, I don't think anybody expects him to do what he did last year again. I don't want to say it was a fluke, but the odds of him going off and doing that again this late in his career, they're pretty low. But he is a great player in his own right. He's a good 200-foot player. He brings heart to the game. That's the most important thing. He never gives up. During the losing streak, he was taking the blame for every loss on himself as the captain, which is something I really like about him. He takes the blame. He doesn't blame others, and he makes it a collective unit. He doesn't single out players. And another issue was with the booing of the fans when that was happening. You had Dubinsky saying everybody turned on them. They were by themselves and they couldn't turn on each other. But then you also had Ryan Murray, who was saying that it was unnecessary, and he was complaining about it, almost feeling sorry for himself, it seemed like. And that was part of the issue with the team. It's so young that a lot of the younger players, they take it as like an insult when something doesn't go their way, when somebody's booing, when something's just not going their way in the audience. And I think that's part of the problem with Saad at the beginning of the year, is he was doing well, but the thing was he wasn't used to being at the bottom of the standings. He wasn't used to having the team being booed off the ice. He wasn't used to struggling, pretty much. He was used to having other players.
He came right off 3 cup winning in the past 5 years Chicago Blackhawks. Everything was going right for them for a while, so it has had to have been hard for Saad to bring that game over the Jackets, who were expected to be good, but they weren't expected to be compete at the level of the Blackhawks. It had to have been hard for Saad to transition to that, and you can understand why he was feeling that way.
Yeah, it was difficult. It was a massive transition. He went from perennially one of the top teams in the league to what is usually one of the bottom teams in the league. And that's a tough transition. He's getting his money, which obviously makes anybody happy, but you could see it in his face. He wasn't happy most of the time. He didn't know what to do. And now that there's teams stepping in, Brandon Dubinsky and Nick Foligno have been just great leaders with this young group of guys. They're stepping up, they're taking the blame, and they're spreading it out evenly across everybody.
Yeah.
The important thing now is stepping up while Dubinsky's out. They need to keep this role going, which actually has been going pretty well so far. And another injury that happened last night was Jared Bull was going to be on the IR. Blocked a shot right in the skate, and he was in obvious discomfort, and that was his 500th career game. So the Blue Jackets have called up Josh Anderson and Michael Chaput from the AHL Monsters, which I'm not a personal fan of Chaput. He's a good minor league player, but his game just doesn't seem to translate into the NHL level. Although I do like Anderson. He's an energy player. He brings speed, he brings power, he brings pretty much everything. And
Yeah.
he has had a scoring touch before when he was in the lower levels. He just needs to find it at the NHL level.
Yeah. Okay, so what is the next topic you had?
The next topic is also on the Blue Jackets. There was a practice fight today, well, a little bit of a scrum, between Ryan Johansson and Fedor Tutin. There's not many details about this, but I won't look too much into it. It was just a really physical drills today with John Tortorella. He wanted the team to make sure they're pushing, and I like this. It shows the team has emotion. It shows that they want to go out there and give it everything they have.
Yeah. Now, I have a question for you. Do you think that having Tortorella yelling at them at practices is helping their game in translate their play into games? Like, say, a couple days ago when John Tortorella had them doing push-ups on the ice. Like, do you think that's been, I know it's obviously very small, but do you think that's been helping them translate their aggressive play in practice to the NHL, or do you think it will in the near future?
I think it already has. One thing I'm waiting for, though, is a training camp for Tortorella next season. That'll be interesting. But the push-ups, while it didn't seem to be that big, I think it was actually bigger than most people realize it was. Push-ups on ice is something nobody wants to do. I think that's pretty obvious. But if they forces them to do something that they don't like to do, then they're not going to play bad and force him to make them do it. So it'll work itself out. I think they're getting ready to go on a big run here soon.
All right, what did you have next on that list of yours?
We have the Ole Mata injury in the game between the Penguins and the Wild yesterday.
Okay, your personal opinion on that, do you think that was a dirty hit from Niederreiter, or do you think it was accidental?
I think it was accidental. I'd say there's a little bit of blame on him, because that's a dangerous area to push somebody, like especially that angle into the boards. But if the door hadn't been opened, which that's questionable whether the goalie did it intentionally to do anything or whatever, if it didn't open, he would have been fine. It would have been nothing. Nobody would have thought anything of it. Yeah. But when that door opened, that's when the problem started.
Yeah, I agree with you on that topic. I don't think it was an intentional hit. I just think they were battling for the puck, and either Mata blew a tire or Niederreiter just got a little too physical, and he ended up pushing him over. And I do agree with you when you say that the bench door played a huge part in it, but I don't think the goalie did it intentionally. I think it was just an honest mistake, and I think Mata, while he is out for a month, I think he'll come back, and I'm sure Niederreiter feels bad about it. Like, it wasn't.
You have to feel bad for that kid, though.
Yeah.
Everything he's gone through so far in his career, you can't help but feel bad.
Yeah.
But another thing that reminds me of is the Chara hit on Pacioretty from a few years ago. Everybody remembers that. But it was a situational awareness type thing. It was in a bad area of the ice. If it had happened anywhere else, say behind the net, nobody would have thought anything of it. But
yeah,
the way
they took action to it as well. Like, they put the padding on the end of the glass so that they could prevent similar types of injuries. It would still obviously come as a shock if you got hit in that position, but it wouldn't have much as an impact on anyone else as it did on Pacioretty.
Yeah. Another thing is, I don't know how much you can actually do to prevent something like Mata's injury again, because you can't really add padding to that without having a problem with the door. But the thing is,
that would be hard.
It was a freak accident. It'll happen.
Yes,
but
that's not something that players can really take advantage of in happening. It's not like they can plan with their goalie to open the door at a certain time and have an opposing player hit into the edge of the bench door. Like, that is something you will likely not ever see again, unless there is obviously a chance. There's a chance for anything to happen in the NHL. It's a wild game, but it's not something that happens frequently, and it's not something you'll see happen again, in my opinion.
Unless you're like Marty Turco opening the door on Roman Polak, but
I remember that.
Yeah, but our next topic, if you're ready to move on from that, is the new All-Star format, which is interesting, to say the least. I haven't seen much 3-on-3 overtime, to be honest. The Blue Jackets have not gone to overtime yet this year, which is kind of disappointing. But I like the idea of 3-on-3. I'm not sure it's the best idea for an All-Star game. Scoring's already high. All this is going to do is cause players to be tired, more likely to get injured.
Yeah. Personally, I like the idea of 3-on-3. I've seen the Leafs in 3-on-3 overtime a lot this season, and personally, just watching them play, it's a very, very fast-paced and exciting game. Like, every rush they go on, I played 4-on-4 hockey a while ago, and it's obviously not as fast-paced as the NHL, but what I can say is that almost every rush the offensive players would go on would be along the lines of, say, a 2-on-1, a 1-on-1, a breakaway, or 2-on-0, or anything. And it was just like that back and forth, and it's super exciting to watch. And with the All-Star format, the All-Star game, in my opinion, has always been kind of a gimmick. Like, it's just kind of like you go there, the players have a good time, and they forget about it. Like, you remember... if you would remember last year, the fantasy draft where Jonathan Toews picked up Phil Kessel second overall, and then when Kessel took to the stage, Toews called him the most coachable player that he's ever met, which obviously makes it funny because earlier in the year there were speculations that Kessel could not, what happened was there was he was talking to the media after practice, and the media... I think it was Dave Feschuk who asked the question. He reports to the Toronto Star. He asked if he thought that he was the reason that Randy Carlyle got fired, and that brought on all this speculation. Is Kessel an uncoachable player? But Kessel had a good time with it. Everyone laughed, and it's like I said, it's a big gimmick. It's a joke. Nothing really happens, so I don't see why people are getting upset with the All-Star game. Like it's not like they changed the playoffs to like a shootout instead of overtime. Like the All-Star game doesn't really mean anything. You just kind of forget about it and move on.
Yeah, I think last year's All-Star game was just like a whole event for everybody to make fun of Phil Kessel, it seemed like, especially the fantasy draft. Like, trading him for Tyler Seguin again.
Yeah, that was fun.
I kind of wish Foligno didn't do that, because it would have made Team Foligno more likely to win. But,
yeah,
that's beside the point. Okay, so now we go from the All-Star game, which is that'll be an interesting topic come around the time it's supposed to happen.
Yes.
But now we have a couple topics involving the New Jersey Devils, Bobby Farnham in specific. What is with this guy right now?
Okay, I honestly think that this is priceless. Okay, so Sidney Crosby, obviously he is one of the best players in the league, one of the best players in the world, but I gotta say it's priceless that Bobby Farnham has more goals than him right now. I mean, obviously Crosby's in a slump. He's not really sure what's been happening to him. But the fact that the Penguins placed this player on waivers literally like 2 weeks ago because they didn't have room for him. He didn't do anything for their team except provide like an energy presence. And then all of a sudden he starts playing for the Devils and he just starts tearing it up for them. You can't really say anything else. He's got 3 goals already, and that's more than Crosby has on the year. That's the deal breaker right there. He's got more goals than Sidney Crosby right now. I know it's early, but it's funny to think that the player that the Penguins just put on waivers, and for basically because he didn't have a place on the team, now has more goals than one of the best players in the world.
Look at it this way: is it possible we're seeing the next David Clarkson with Farnham?
Oh, well, that is hard to see. I personally have no idea. I'd like to hear your input on this.
Well, I like Clarkson. Not necessarily. I like the way he plays. I don't like his production for the amount of money he has. Yeah. But the thing about him is, he was amazing with the Devils, to say the least. He earned that $5.5 million.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it didn't translate to another team. Could we see the same thing with Farnham? He couldn't perform with the Penguins, and I don't think he could perform anywhere else. There's just something about the Devils that makes not great players play like they are superstars almost.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I definitely don't think Farnham is going to get up to the level that Clarkson produced at. But again, if he produces at least 10 goals, then he is a player I would love on my playoff team, on the Leafs when they ever become a playoff team for a $1 million or $2 million contract. I would have loved I was a fan of Clarkson when he was on the Leafs. I just hated his contract. And I think that if they had kept him, but he had a $1 million or $2 million deal, then I personally think that would have been a great player to keep around during the rebuild. A veteran, an unspoken veteran who talks to the youngsters and gets them focused on playing in the NHL and understanding the game. He's been there and he's done a lot, so I think that Clarkson is the type of player that you would want on your team if he comes with a cheap price. I don't think Farnham's going to see himself signed to a $5.5 million deal anytime soon, but if he can keep up this pace, then I could see him generating interest from other NHL teams.
The thing about that offseason with the Clarkson deal and also the Horton deal, that just set up the Blue Jackets and the Maple Leafs with massive problems. Because Jarmo Kekalainen, he was a first-time GM. He didn't insure the contract of Horton. And then Horton, we all know what happened to him. But that put the Blue Jackets in a really bad spot, which eventually led to them taking on Clarkson's really bad deal. Although, one thing I will say, I'm interested to see how Clarkson does under Tortorella. He hasn't really had that chance yet.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that Clarkson. I don't think Clarkson is ever going to produce the way that he did in New Jersey. If he was young, if he was 24, 25 or whatever, then I could see him stepping up and producing, and potentially bouncing back. But the thing is, he's like 32, I believe. I can't see him personally producing back like he did in New Jersey. I think he's on the decline right now, but I can see him evolving into another maybe 10, 15 goal scorer. I'm not sure about a 30 goal scorer though.
Yeah, because the thing about, I think Tortorella's as close to the system as you're going to get to the Devils. That isn't the Devils. It's block shots, go on the counterattack, pretty much. You're not going to really find that with most teams anymore. But the thing about Clarkson is, he can block a shot. Everybody knows that.
Yeah, that's very true.
And
He'll throw himself in front of anything. He's a heart and soul type of player.
And that's another thing, like Gregory Campbell. I mean, how much better of a coach can you get for Gregory Campbell?
That's very true.
Okay, but back to the Devils, since we're getting off topic there. Tyler Kennedy signed a professional tryout.
Yep.
I think he could make the team.
Yeah, I do too, I'll be honest. Though, you know what, the one thing that sticks out to me about this PTO is the fact that Kennedy was already on a tryout with the Devils earlier in the season. He didn't make the cut, but they've brought him back a second time. So you gotta wonder, like, what do you think he's gonna do about that? Do you think he's gonna make the team, or do you think he's going to... Or do you think he's going to produce the same way that he did in the first training camp?
I think he's going to make the team. It's just, he's a very underrated player in my opinion. He's good defensively, not amazing offensively, but he's a great third liner, fourth liner. You're not going to get much better than that for that situation.
The Devils are producing a lot higher, or performing a lot better than everyone thought they would. And I think if they do end up in the similar situation to the Leafs, where they do end up potentially in the race for a playoff spot, I think Kennedy would be a good player to have for that run. He's had experience. He was a member of the Penguins and the Sharks for a long time. Both are teams who have lots of they've had lots of playoff experience. And he was also on the Islanders for their run last year. So he's been on a playoff team for the majority of his career, and he could really bring something to the team if the Devils are looking to contend.
Another thing, going back to what you just mentioned about the Sharks, this wasn't on our list, but it just came to my mind. What do you think about the Patrick Marleau rumors? Do you think he will be dealt?
It all depends on how the Sharks play later on in the year. Honestly, if the Sharks, their play kind of started off really well and then started taking a hilt, but now that they're if they can get back up to their level and start playing the way that they used to, then I think Marleau will stick around maybe for one final run. But if they start declining, then I think they're going to part with him. And the reason I think this is because if the Sharks are in a playoff spot, most of the teams that he would accept a trade to, he said, they're all in the Sharks division and they're rival teams. I think two of them were the Kings and the Ducks.
And then the other one was the Rangers. The other one was Rangers.
I don't think they would. I personally don't think they would trade Marleau to a team like the Kings or the Ducks if they knew that there was a chance that the two teams would be matched up in the playoffs, because they don't want Marleau to come back and just score against them or do something to prevent them from
cost them the cup, essentially.
Yeah. I don't think they'd want to take that risk if they were heading deeper into the playoffs. But I think the Sharks need to rebuild soon. If all their stars are aging, and Thornton, Marleau, Pavelski, and I think that if it gets to the point where they realize that they're not going to be a playoff team, then I think Marleau will be dealt. And I think the Rangers will be the first team that they'll look to trade him to, because he's entirely different conference, and they won't have to match up against him as much.
I don't think the Rangers can actually take him on, though. What would they give up for him?
That's also very true.
They don't have a future in New York. They just don't. That's already gone.
Yeah. Dealing all their prospects, they've dealt almost all their prospects and picks in the near future for.
I guess the only one they really have left is Brady Shea.
They have Brady Shea, and they also have another prospect. He's a Russian scorer. I forget what his name is, I'll be honest. I'll just look that up right now, just while you keep talking.
Brady Shea is a good prospect. There's no doubt about that. He could. It's rough to say he could end up being one of the best defensemen in the NHL. I doubt it, but it's possible. He's a very unknown, pretty much. Nobody really knows what he can do when he gets up there. Do I think the Sharks would take him for Patrick Marleau? I don't think so. I just don't think there's enough value with Shea alone. They don't have a pick to add to it, so it makes it difficult to do anything with that. And,
okay, so this is the prospect I was thinking of. It's Pavlo Buchnevich. I'm not sure exactly what his name is, but I just said his name. I'm not sure why I said that. But I know that he is one of their most highly touted prospects on forward, ever since Oscar Lindbergh made the team and stepped up, and since they dealt away Duclair. So that's and they also have the goalie and Mackenzie Skapski, who show that he can be decent.
Speaking of Anthony Duclair, now we move out west to. We're already out. I forgot what team we were talking about, but now we move out west to the Coyotes.
Yep.
This team, I don't know what to say about them. They're one of the most entertaining teams to watch in the NHL. Max Domi, you have Mike Smith being phenomenal again. Then you have Duclair. You have. What is this team? Like, why are they doing so good?
I personally have no idea. I wasn't expecting him to be this good. I was expecting him to be in the race for Austin Matthews, which brings me to another topic, actually. What do you think the Arizona Coyotes are going to do about Austin Matthews? I've heard speculation that they're going to do whatever they can to get him, because he's just the perfect fit for their team. You know, he has the potential to be a number one center, just like another fellow prospect, Dylan Strome. And he was actually one of the rare players that was born and raised in Arizona. So this kind of player seems like a match made in heaven. And I've been heard that their GM, Don Maloney, would be willing to trade like almost anything to get this first overall pick. So what do you think is the farthest that the Coyotes would go with this?
I don't think they'd trade Domi or Duclair. I think that needs to be thrown out there. I don't think they'd trade Strome. They might, but I don't think so. I don't think that they would. Possible they trade Smith, but I doubt it, because that would leave them in a very tough goaltending situation. They don't trade Oliver Ekman-Larsson. I know that for a fact. You can't trade him. They already got. Now that Gamble's gone, they don't have a piece really to.
That's very true. You know what? I think if they were to get that first overall pick, they might have to deal somebody along the lines of Dylan Strome. Because besides him, they don't really have a blue chip prospect in the organization that's worth a first overall pick. What they could do is they could trade somebody along the lines of Martin Hanzal, who's proven to be very well for them, and then trade like a B-level prospect such as Ryan McInnes or Christian Dvorak, one of the two, and like their first round pick. If that depends on how they finish, though. If they make the playoffs, then it's going to make the deal to get Austin Matthews a lot harder. But if they finish in the top three, then they could include their pick and someone like Martin Hanzal or a prospect to get that first overall pick.
We're running out of time here, so we have to get through these next few topics pretty quick. Yep. Duck struggles. What do you think about that?
I am very, very surprised. I had no idea that the Ducks would be in this much of a struggle heading into the season. They were, I'm going to be honest, they were my favorite to win the Cup this year. And they're doing very well. They were doing very well, and then they have brought in Kevin Bieksa to provide veteran presence to their defense. They got rid of Emerson Needham, and they brought in Carl Hagelin, who was expected to play alongside of Getzlaf and Perry on the first line. I thought that they upgraded their team this year, and I was expecting them to actually push very well for the playoffs. But now it's not looking like that at all. They don't look like the Anaheim Ducks that we saw from last year and the year before.
Yeah, it's just Getzlaf, Perry, Kessler. How do you do anything with that?
I don't know. Honestly, they all three of those players are underperforming greatly, and there's not really a reason why they are. They're expected to be 70, 80 point guys, and it's just crazy that they would underperform at this rate.
We have two goalies. We have Henrik Lundqvist and we have Andrew Hammond. These two are. It's hard to put them in the same sentence, actually, but Lundqvist has been amazing. He straight up, I believe he has just under a 95 save percentage and under 2 for goals against. It's just, how do you do this?
And you expect that, you'd expect that from a goalie like Henrik Lundqvist. He's one of the best goalies in the league. I believe, my personal opinion, he's second behind Carey Price.
I think right now he's better than Price, but the thing is, Price is injured, so we can't really make
you can't really compare the two right now. But personally, I think Lundqvist, whenever the average hockey fan thinks of Henrik Lundqvist, they think, oh, he's a good goalie. He's on the New York Rangers. Rangers win a lot, so you gotta put 2 and 2 together. Lundqvist is a good goalie. But I don't think anyone really looks at Lundqvist's stats and how good of a goalie he really is. Because as good as the Rangers are on the ice, They don't they have a good team, but they don't have like a Blackhawks or like a Kings from 2014 type team in front of this. So there has been games where he's bailed them out, and he's just a great goalie all around. He puts up solid stats, and he deserves a cup, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think they might have had that team last year, the year before. I think losing Marty St. Louis is actually a much bigger loss than everything it is.
Yeah.
When it comes to the postseason. Right now, it's not that big of a deal, but in a few months, that could be different. Andrew Hammond, I don't think anybody expected him to keep up any type of good play.
That's very true. You know what? There was, I believe last year they called 2014 the year of the goalie, because there were just so many cases of a goalie stepping up and producing just at a very high rate. And I personally didn't expect Hammond to play the way that he did last year. But he stepped up, especially since he wasn't even playing well in the AHL. They just had to call him up because it was Robin Lehner who was out with an injury. So they had to call him up, and he was their last resort, and he ended up, a 15-0 streak or something, and he had a certain amount of shutouts in that time.
Yeah,
he stepped up all around for them, and I personally think that I think he's deserved the title of number one goalie for the Senators, and I think if he continues playing like this, the Senators have a good chance to carry on into the playoffs.
Yeah, well, we need to start wrapping it up. But just a couple other notes. Hunter Shinkarik sent back down by the Canucks. I wasn't expecting that. Guy Boucher released from his deal after announcing he wouldn't return to the team. I believe it was H.C. Burns. I believe it was his team.
Yeah, it was H.C. Burns.
And then the final note is that Rexall Place tonight, there were scouts from 16 different organizations in attendance. This is going to be interesting.
Oh, I also have one more topic I'd like to add in there that we will likely go over in our next episode. I personally don't know how we didn't bring this up today, but next time we will also address the Matt Duchene trade rumors circulating around Colorado. He's supposed to be their number one center in the future. Nathan McKinnon's taking over, but Duchene has recently stepped up despite his early struggles. So we will see what the deal is with Duchene and if it's more likely that he stays or gets traded.
Yeah. And for Alex Hobson, I'm William Espy, and we will see you guys next time.
Thanks for joining us. Yeah, no kidding.